What is up, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Collection Commentary. In today's video, we're going to be taking a look at this customized Olamic Wayfarer 247 or 24/7. This is their everyday carry-sized knife, and the name is intended to invoke those feelings of carrying this every day, 24/7. Now, if those of you are unfamiliar, Olamic has a few different models. They have the full-size Wayfarer with a 4-inch blade, and those are only sold in a custom form. Then there's the Olamic Wayfarer Compact, which is a little bit smaller than the main Wayfarer, and is a mid-tech, but there's only one made of each. And then you have the Wayfarer 247, which is their smallest variant, and is also a mid-tech. Many of them are made completely uniquely, but there are some kind of base entry-level models just under the $400 mark that there are multiple copies of. I don't know. There actually might be slight differences in every single one, considering the Olamic slogan is never the same. But I do believe I've seen some of those kind of entry-level models crop up, just like plain titanium, you know. But this one is particularly special because I got this one personally customized by Eugene from Olamic. The first thing that I want to do before we get into anything on this knife is I've polished up the Timascus clip. For those of you who are unfamiliar, Timascus gets dulled pretty quickly with things like fingerprints and hand oil and everything like that. So I gave it a quick polish, and I just wanted to take a moment to show that off to you guys before I get my hands all over the knife. So you can see the gorgeous purple anodization along the sculpted titanium. And then I'm just going to kind of show off the Timascus a bit. So you can see it's absolutely gorgeous. It's super shiny. The anodization is beautiful. The pattern is awesome. And this was really the aspect of the knife that got me to pull the trigger on this particular one. Now, when I bought the knife, it came as a plain titanium version, and then it just had the Timascus clip, and that was it. And then everything else on this knife is pretty much fully customized. So I'll get to that in a moment. I am trying out a new structure for my videos with two different sections. First is the features and flaws, where we're going to kind of talk about some of the normal aspects of the knife. And then at the end, what's special to me, which is going to involve a little bit of a story time and talking about why the knife is awesome in my collection personally, or the way I feel about it. If you have any comments on how you feel about the structure of the video, it is something that I'm trying out, so please leave a comment down below. So let's get started with the features and flaws on this knife. The action on it it's okay. The deployment is pretty fantastic in that it rockets out with pretty incredible speed if you hit the flipper tab with a nice push. If you just totally light switch it by coming straight down, you will not get deployment. It doesn't really function that way. And if you just push button, then you get a really intense deployment. If you kind of do somewhere in the middle by pushing down and in, that's when you get pretty standard average deployment. Now, deployment on this knife is smooth, but it's I don't know, it's a little instant. You don't really feel it so much, so I do like the deployment. However, I dislike that with the shape of this flipper tab, I can't really just light switch it. I do have to give it a bit of a push button. And the D10 on it is kind of light, kind of moderate, I guess, if we're really getting into comparisons. But you don't always get deployment on the knife, especially vertically. And so you really got to like hit it pretty well, which, you know, all said and done, this is about a $600 knife. And so I'm a little disappointed with the action. And then beyond that, it will not drop shut. The blade is just going to stay wherever it is. You can shake it shut, but it's not super free-fally. So while the bearings are smooth, there are definitely better options in terms of action at a cheaper price point. Now, I asked Eugene from Olamic about this because he also had my Wayfarer Compact, when he was customizing this, because he was fixing some stuff up on that one. And when I got the compact back, it did have the kind of action that I consider to be amazing, which is where the deployment on it is completely glass smooth, and then the blade will drop shut with either no shaking or a slight shake, whereas this one requires a little bit more effort. And so I quizzed him. I said, hey, Eugene, I'm trying to figure out why the action on the compact is so much better. Do you use a different bearing system? And what he told me was that the type of bearing system is the same on each knife, but that they're purchased from different suppliers. So obviously this knife gets a little bit of a cheaper option. And I think it would do well to have the compact bearings used on this knife. Maybe there's other aspects to the action that I'm not privy to. I'm not a knife maker. I don't know nearly enough to be telling anyone who does make knives how to do their job. That's certainly not what I'm trying to do here, but I will say that the difference between the compact action and the 247 action is incredibly noticeable, and the fact that I have shelled out quite a bit of money for this knife and it still doesn't drop shut the way like a Wii knife does, for example, is a little disappointing to me. And I would say that the action on this knife is actually my least favorite aspect of it, and if it wasn't for the customization and all the other amazing things that I love about the knife, I probably wouldn't keep it, because action is a big thing for me. Blades dropping shut is a big thing for me. It's just a personal pet peeve. Obviously, it's all personal preference. So I have no quarrels with anybody who differs from my opinion, but that's just it. When I'm shelling out large amounts of money for a knife, that's what I want out of it. And so this knife is kind of getting by in my collection on all of its other merits as opposed to the action. So what are some of those other merits? Well, first up is the ergonomics. Again, the 247, meaning 24/7 every day. This was the answer to all the questions Eugene was getting in the past about, are you ever going to make a smaller knife that I can carry with me every day because your knives are too big for me? And this was the big old yes that he gave to the community. Now, obviously, ergonomics are a hard thing to get through video, but if you can just see here, this is super comfortable. Now, if I just unroll my fingers a little bit, you can see they all fit very nicely in this kind of long curve. My index finger is the perfect size for this finger choil. So if you have bigger hands, this probably isn't going to do it for you, but I will say that the compact is probably going to be the perfect size for you. So I think anybody is going to be served by an Olamic Wayfarer, and it just kind of depends on your hand size as to which one is the right fit for you. But you can see my finger fits perfectly in this finger choil. The knife has this nice curve in the back, which makes it curl really well in the hand. So you can see it kind of matches up with this line in my hand, and so as we cup the knife and then fully close it around, this is just going to fluidly drop into the hand very smoothly. I don't feel the pocket clip really at all. All of that kind of melts away into the palm, which is excellent. You do have this kind of hooked flipper tab, which on many knives can be a bit of an issue, especially if you're pushed up against it. But you can see the way that I grip this knife with the saber grip, I'm actually not pushed up against it. There's a little bit of a gap there. And so I think it lends itself to really cool aesthetics. I think it does a good job of protecting you. If I push this, if I puncture this through something and I get feedback, if my hand slides forward on the knife, I'm not going to have any concern with this hand sliding up onto the blade because I've got this nice hooked flipper tab protecting me there. There is a little bit of jimping right here on the spine of the blade, and you can see it's only 3 little bumps. And there's really not much going on there, but it's the perfect spot for your thumb to just completely dig in. It's a little bit hot if you put a lot of pressure, but it's really great. I like the jimping here. I've seen jimping done better, but I think overall the way the ergonomics of this knife work out is really great. I really like the way it feels in the hand. It's a little bit thinner in terms of the handle thickness than I typically prefer on my knives. The reason I got rid of my Benchmade 940 was just because it was too skinny for me. And this one's right on the edge of too skinny for me, but overall the knife fills the hand well enough. It's got a pretty good slicer, pretty good pinch grip as well for slicing. Your index finger also is served very well by the location of the jimping, and it's on a bit of a ramp, which gives you nice feedback, and then you can pinch the knife pretty well. It's not amazing, but it's certainly plenty fine. So I think the ergonomics on this knife are really, really fantastic. I will say that the Timascus clip, the reason a lot of makers don't do clips in Timascus, and the reason that Eugene over time has kind of started to lean away from doing Timascus clips, not to say that he doesn't do them, because he absolutely does, but he does have a preference to lean away from it a little bit because they're very tough. By tough, I mean there's a lot of tension there, and getting this in and out of my pocket, especially with the sculpted frame, it chews up my pocket a little bit, I'm not going to lie. And it's just because the Timascus, the nature of Timascus is it's very, very sturdy. And so there's not a lot of, there's a lot of tension here. And it's very difficult to kind of get this in and out of the pocket. So while I really prefer it from an aesthetic standpoint, this is not going to be the most useful or the most pant-friendly clip that you can get. So just consider that if you're ever looking at a Timascus clip on any knife. There is also not a lot of distance you can see. So luckily I don't wear super thick pants, so this serves me plenty fine. But between the sculpted titanium and the tension here and all of that, this is not the best pocket clip setup, I have to admit. The next thing on this knife is something that you all who may have seen my WE 60D commentary will remember is a big thing for me, which is balance. This knife has exceptional balance, and it is all presented right in the finger choil, right where I want it. So it's going to be difficult to show you, but my finger is just kind of sitting right here in the finger choil, and if I let go, the knife is perfectly balanced right there. And this is, again, something that I feel is kind of lost on a lot of flippers these days. Not to say that most flippers are unbalanced, but I feel like many that I come across are do not have their balance point right where that finger choil is. And I feel that when a knife is balanced at the finger choil, everything else about the knife kind of comes together. It feels better in your hand. It feels more natural. The weight of the knife is a little bit diluted by the proper balance, and I just think that it really ups the quality of a knife, and it really makes a knife that, or it's a feature that really helps a knife stand out that you might not even be privy to, or it might be an unconscious thing. You know, you might pick up a knife and go, hey, this feels really good. I really like this. You know, I can't quite put my finger on it. It's probably the balance. So I really, really appreciate that this knife is balanced the way it is. I'm not sure. They do make the 247 in a non-sculpted version. I would be curious to see if adding that extra bit of titanium back to the frame of the knife adds enough weight that it starts to lean back. So if anybody has one of the non-sculpted 247s and they want to leave a comment down below, I'd be really interested to hear about that. But for me personally, on this exact knife, the balance is fantastic, and that's a major, major bonus for me. Another thing to talk about on this knife is something I mentioned before, which is the flipper tab. It is skeletonized, as is this little hole here. Now, these collect a lot of pocket crud, and so while I think aesthetically it makes the knife look super sweet, it looks like a bit of a shark fin. I've gotten comments from people both in and outside of the knife collecting community that were positive about this look of this feature, and so I think that's super cool. But it's something that I have to maintain because, you know, I like my knives to pretty much always be shined up and looking their best. I know that's goes against some of the reasons to have a knife in the first place, but that's just the way I see it. This is pocket jewelry for me, especially a knife like this that's completely done up. And so I find myself busting out Q-tips and stuff, trying to clean out that crud pretty frequently, which, you know, it's a bit of a trade-off, aesthetics for having to deal with less function, and that's just, you know, part of collecting knives. So that's something that I thought you guys should be aware of, but it's not a huge deal. So that's pretty much it for the features and flaws. The knife, the blade is pretty great. It's not super sharp coming from the factory, which I was a little bit surprised. But it makes for a pretty great slicer. It does have I believe it's a flat grind. Yeah, it does have a flat grind here, a bit of a swedge. You can see the two-tone satin and black wash finish, which I think is pretty neat. I like the black wash. It'll, do well to protect me from too much marking from using the knife. And I think it looks pretty neat. It is M390 steel, which is absolutely fantastic. The reason I haven't talked too much about the blade on this one is because it's good to go. It's got a nice long cutting edge. It's got a nice flat grind, and this is pretty much going to do anything you need it to do. It's not going to make the best slicer on a cutting board, just because the shape of the knife ends up having your hand be... It's really hard to show this on video, but it really doesn't give you a great angle to get to this end of the knife. But it's going to serve you absolutely fine. This blade is completely good to go. So as far as what's special to me, as I said, when I purchased the knife, the reason I did so was because of the Timascus clip. It was the first chunk of Timascus that I owned, and Timascus is something that I've really been trying to get my hands on for a while, and it's a pretty expensive material that comes on pretty expensive knives, so it's not something you can always snag right away. But it was definitely something I was after, and so when I saw this on Blade Forums, I immediately jumped on it. It was a pretty decent price, and the knife was exactly as you see it, except it was not anodized. The titanium was all plain gray. All the hardware was plain gray. Everything was plain, and then it just had the Timascus clip. So I got it, and then pretty immediately I had commissioned Eugene to do some custom work on it. So while this knife is very much in the technical sense a mid-tech, for me personally, and for the way I view the knife on an emotional level, this kind of feels like my first full custom. I don't have any full custom knives to really speak of. And so this kind of fills that gap for me as my first full custom, even though in a very technical sense, it is not a full custom. But that said, let's kind of go over a little bit about what we changed about the knife, because it is practically all new. The only two things that are original on this knife are the frame itself and the clip. Everything else is new. So what we did was a purple sort of blurplish anodization on the entire knife, swapped out blurple screws. Eugene did this custom pivot setup with multicolor anodization. We swapped out the blade, so this is not the original blade. This is a brand new blade. And then we did this beautiful custom carved multicolor backspacer. I'm just going to give you a moment to soak in how pretty this is. And this is all done by hand, probably with a Dremel or a tool, but still by hand. And then you can see on the inside, you've got Wayfarer 247 and the T114 serial number. Left a little area flat there to do that. And so that's everything that's custom on the knife, pretty much the whole thing. So I was super happy to get this back from Eugene. We had done a fair bit of talking about what I wanted on the knife. My original ideas were a little bit less extreme than what ended up here. We did all this multicolor work to sort of match the Timascus clip. And I have kind of contentious feelings on that. So originally I was just going to get like a purple back bar, still carved and custom, but we were just going to do purple anodization. And then I hadn't even requested anything for the pivot. I was just going to leave the pivot and all the hardware silver. I didn't really know how much Eugene was willing to do, and so I didn't want to push him too hard, so I asked for pretty basic stuff. I said I wanted a carved backspacer in purple, and I wanted to anodize the knife purple, and that was pretty much it. And then upon getting the knife, Eugene had said, hey man, I think that a multicolor backspacer will do better to fit the Timascus clip theme, and I'm going to go ahead and multicolor your pivot as well. And so I said, neat, go for it. I did tell him, I'm not a big fan of bronze. I really don't like bronze. I don't like bronze anodization. I don't really like bronze or gold colors. So I was a little bit skeptical. But he went ahead and did it, and I got the knife, and I was like, wow, this looks really good. Now, I will say, my one point of contention between the multicolor hardware here on regular titanium and the actual Timascus is that Timascus has a different color palette from regular titanium when doing anodization. You can see on the Timascus, you get light blues, dark blues, light purples, dark purples, and orange. And that's the real distinction there, is that it's orange, not bronze. And so it doesn't actually match the clip, the multicolor hardware. So I did discuss with Eugene, I may end up sending this back to have him remove the anodization from the back bar and the pivot and just go ahead and redo those in purple, or like a purple blue multicolor, which would be cool. I just really don't like bronze. That said, oh, and the fact that it doesn't exactly match the Timascus in terms of color palette. But that said, the more I look at it, the more I feel like, even though it's not my preference, that this is still how the knife should look. I still kind of agree with Eugene that this is how it should be done, even if it's not to my liking, which is kind of a weird place to feel, or a weird place to be as a collector. It's my knife. It should be how I want it. But I, on this particular one, have this kind of like weird feeling where what's best for the knife is better than what's best for me. And I feel like what's best for the knife is that it remains in this configuration. So we'll see. Stay tuned for that to find out whether or not I hold to those thoughts, or if I decide to redo the anodization on the hardware here. I'm really just not sure. But so that's what makes the knife super special to me. I had such a blast working with Eugene on this knife. I think that anybody that's on the fence about buying one of his knives absolutely should move forward with doing so. He offers an excellent spa treatment for the knife. He'll customize it pretty much any way you want. He has completely reasonable pricing for all of that, and he was just an absolute pleasure to work with. So what really makes this knife special to me and makes it a real hallmark in my collection is the fact that it's really my first attempt, or my first foray into fully customizing a knife. It's my first piece of actual Timascus. It has really great feel and look and aesthetics to it. It's just a perfect fit for my collection. So that's what I really love about it, guys. Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe to see other awesome knives in the future. If you like this video, please leave it a like. It definitely helps. And I will see you guys next time.